Hello everybody, my name is Tech Sergeant Saxton and today I'm going to be briefing you on the 173rd Armament Shop's organizational culture. We're not only going to be looking at the current climate of the armament shop, but also the history of where it was at 10 years ago and how it's changed drastically and for the better. 10 years ago, the 173rd Armament Shop was very different. Many people viewed it as a very hostile work environment. New people were treated poorly. It was extremely cliquey, and the only way for upward mobility was to be a part of the good old boys club. There was a very small group of tech sergeants and staff sergeants that seemed to run the place how they saw fit and were completely in charge of the culture where they worked. A lot of people referred to a specific group of 3 people that were all tech sergeants as SAMs because of the letters in their last name, spelt out SAM, and they, just like a SAM or a surface-to-air missile, would lock on to different targets, different people in the shop, and would continuously shoot them down. The more reaction they got out of these people, the more they would target them. They would also play another game where they would take the new guy and they would try to not talk to him for a full year. Regardless of what that person would ask them for help or whatnot, they would essentially turn to someone next to them and talk through that person to communicate to the new person. Once the new person had been there a year, only then would they start to show a little bit of respect for that individual. But usually at that time, the individual had very little respect for those who were playing the game the year prior. Unfortunately, leadership at that time seemed to see no problem with the games that were being played and the way people were being treated. This might be because they're quite a bit older and they came from an older generation where that was seen as quite normal. In the 173rd Fighter Wing, most people are technicians, so instead of serving 20 years and being out, they serve an additional 15 years, which means that there's a lot of holdover ideas from older times that we've seemed to progress from. Due to all the different hazing from all the different groups, it was very difficult for people to trust everyone in the shop. The shop was divided into smaller groups, and with those groups, you saw every group fighting with the other group. The back shoppers were fighting with the day shift was fighting with the night shift, and the night shift was fighting with the back shoppers, and vice versa. And no one seemed to be getting along on opposite shifts. Anytime there was a mishap, each shift would try to pass the buck to the other. No one would ever take responsibility when mishaps did happen. Unfortunately, this behavior was able to last for quite a while because the maintenance shop actually had very good maintenance practices. And so from an outsider's point of view, it was very difficult to pin down that something wrong was going on in the shop. Eventually, members in the shop did start to get in trouble. Certain individuals were getting in trouble inside and outside of work, which drew the attention of the maintenance commander. And he began to scrutinize and look closer at the practices that were happening inside of the shop, besides just the maintenance that was going on. This eventually led to an ORI inspection, and a few members were fired from our shop. After a few members were fired from the shop, there were a couple of other members that decided that they should also leave the shop and got jobs in other work centers and other bases. At this time, the senior NCOs in the shop also moved on into different locations on base, which gave room for new senior NCOs and also new NCOs to start taking control of the shop and try to change the culture that was in place at the moment. Right away, leadership at all levels began working on making the shop a much more harmonious workplace. The younger airmen were encouraged by leadership to voice their opinion on how to make the shop a much better place. Leadership was very receptive to trying new things that may have been seen as unconventional in hopes that it would help improve the shop. Through this new attitude of openness and receptiveness, members at all levels began to feel more ownership towards the work they were accomplishing, which in turn made them feel more ownership to the shop in general. The willingness to allow individuals to be more innovative and try new solutions that may have been seen as unconventional in the past seem to really pay off in the end. For example, a new approach was taken to resiliency training, which used to be done quarterly in the hangar, and people would break up into very large groups of 50 people. There would be some people you knew in the group and some people you had no clue who they were. You may have seen them once or twice on the flight line, but at that point you would be encouraged to talk about sensitive topics in these very large groups, which was very hard for a lot of people to buy into. It's very hard being open in a scenario where you have people who know you mixed in with people who don't know you, and you halfway have to shout just for everyone to hear. Later on, a new method was tried. Members were allowed to handle it in shop, and in the armament shop, they broke down into even smaller groups. And instead of having to have these trainings at work, they decided they were going to try a new approach and have them in a more intimate area. So members were allowed to dress down, leave base, and go to either a bar or a restaurant or even sometimes someone's house, and sit in a small group of 8 to 10 people and begin to talk about current subjects, whatever the resiliency subject was for that weekend. This ranged from suicide prevention to current social issues, and it gave members the opportunity to really talk to each other and tell each other how they feel. Due to the nature of being in a more intimate environment, members seem to open up a lot more to each other and give more insight into each other's lives, which really helped members to understand each other and where we come from. There are quite a few people in the shop that may be different as far as race or culture, but for the most part, most people in the armament shop have a very specific unison political viewpoint. There are a couple members that don't share the same viewpoints as others, and being able to listen to them and hear from them helped relations quite a bit. It seemed to really break down and destroy some potentially unconscious biases people may have had about people by just learning more about them and getting to know them better. Members not only learned about their similarities, but also their differences and the experiences that each member had to lead to these differences that they did have with each other. The shop is a very different place from where it once was 10 years ago. Innovation is not only encouraged by leadership, but also fostered at all levels. Because of this, members' commitment to the shop, its well-being, and the work it accomplishes seems to have greatly improved. Right now in the shop, members are either working towards being the most technically proficient in their career field, or they're invested in the members around them and showing them how to be a great leader, or there are some who are constantly looking for new and better ways to improve the shop, whether through maintenance practices or even through social gatherings just to improve shop morale. The shop was not without its problems, though. There are a couple of individuals who seem apprehensive about wanting to join in the current climate and culture that is going on within the shop. They're not very willing to open up to others and tend to want to keep to themselves. This could be because of a lack of interest in the career field that they are in. Unfortunately, being in a guard base, there are incentives for joining specific career fields, and the ones who seem to be the least happy are the ones who joined purely for a signing bonus. Due to the lack of communication that they have with other members in the shop, it seems as though these people do have preconceived notions and unconscious bias about certain people in the shop, mostly because they haven't spent enough time to get to know them and learn more about them. Unfortunately, their only reason they wanted to be in the shop was purely for financial reasons. And it seems as though they may have landed in a career field that may have not been the best fit for them. But there are NCOs that are currently trying to help specific individuals in finding a new career field on base so that they can live a happier life and be happy about the work that they do. And the continued success of the shop is dependent on the members of the shop's willingness to stay dedicated to the culture that they've actually helped to create. As long as they can see the benefits from the way they treat each other and how it affects their work environment, it could continuously go on. A very interesting thing about the shop is if once you walk inside, you'll notice that there's not a lot of artifacts. There's not any trophies anywhere or banners or signs. But if you talk to the members and you hear them tell stories about how things used to be and how things were, you really get a sense of how tight this group is and how much everyone appreciates each other. That's the end of the presentation. Hopefully, throughout this presentation, you've been able to see how important good communication is in a shop and how just being respectful and open with each other can lead to a better work environment that everyone's able to be successful in. Thank you very much.